for hosting me. It's such a great pleasure. My name is Mohammed Tamimi. I live in the city of Hebron, and I've been working in great details with a lot of grassroots activities, especially with communities that are facing settler harassment, settlement expansion, land expropriation, and house demolitions, I would say, for the past 20 years plus. And we are trying to actually to do something about that in terms of trying to provide services for the people who are at the brink of the whole thing, at the forefront of facing off to the Israeli occupation. So that's the activist type, the part of my job. The other thing is that having to actually to look at the general situation these days, I would dare to say that in Hebron or in the entire OPT, there is a sense of defeat for the Palestinians, especially when it comes down after the agreement between Israel and the UAE, and yes, yesterday with Bahrain to actually to normalize relationships and have quote unquote a peace deal between Israel and those countries. The sense of again the sense of defeat is overwhelming. The Palestinians actually, I just read a report today that they are actually even thinking of having to withdraw from the Arab League as a result of what has taken place about a couple of days ago, when the Arabs have refused adamantly to actually to issue a statement against anybody who's going to go and normalize with Israel without having to abide by the Arab Initiative of 2022, and it was agreed on the Arab level that that there's not going to be any mutual recognition until Israel actually pulls out from to the 1967 borders. And now it seems that there is some sort of a race by Arab countries to basically abandon that initiative and actually go directly and normalize relationship with Israel on the premise of peace for peace, which we see as a big victory, not only for Bibi Netanyahu, but also for Trump in a very, very critical time. When as the time is leading up to the American elections, we see that victory was very much needed by Trump in order for him to sustain his campaign, and because he was losing on a number of fronts, but now he ended up actually pushing on the Arab countries to go ahead with their normalization of Israel, so that he can boast about that in his elections, and might help him to actually to come back as the president of the United States, which is, I think, a lot of people will agree, it's a very, very horrible news that nobody is wanting to for that to happen. So now it seems that it's actually there is more points for him. He can actually boast and come out and said that I delivered. You thought it was not doable, and now it's doable. Now not only one Arab country, but two and maybe three. Maybe he will be able to deliver Saudi Arabia in the next coming few days. So the whole thing is for the Palestinians is very gloomy. We do believe that we feel that we are betrayed by our next of kins, and there is a sense of despair that is actually being all over the OPT, as people are being just taken aback by this. So it doesn't look good on the ground. The Israeli settlement movement, or maybe the government itself, is actually taking more and more steps on the ground to consolidate, I would say, their victory. They wanted to do it through the annexation. It did not happen, or was delayed a little bit, but definitely we see more and more violations are taking place on the ground. This year, yes, we are actually for the past, I would say, 10 years, we have been trying to help out the people who are trying to collect their olives, to by bringing internationals coming in to work as a protective presence, to actually maybe to be much closer to the Palestinians who are on the ground. But as you know, this year because of COVID, we are not able to actually to do this because of the restrictions. And this is where I know that within a lot of circles in international organizations that I'm working with, that there's been a lot of serious discussion that this year is going to be the highest number in terms of settler violence. They're going to take advantage that there is no international presence, which means that there are no eyewitnesses. The Palestinians, even with the international presence, they usually sometimes will take I wouldn't say take advantage, but they will use the protective presence in order for them to be collecting olives with them. That means that there's going to be, this year is going to be less olives to be collected. The army is not actually giving us a lot of time in order for us to go into areas very close to settlements and actually collect olives. They cut on this issue, and I think again, the settlers are going to take a breath of fresh air, knowing that all of these kind of that the Gulf is going towards them, that they have that sense of we actually won. So it's going to be a hard olive harvest. I will definitely say, I have to say that. What we are going to try to do is try to stand up with these Palestinians, at least in Bethlehem and Hebron, as much as we can. Hopefully, there's not going to be attacks, but I know that there's going to be. The only thing that you can do at this point is that once we give out the information out regarding attacks that are taking place or what have you, that within your own circles, and I know that within your own circles, you know how things are going, that we're probably going to bring more pressure on the Israeli state. Now, we tried that before, pressuring Israel in the UN, we pressure Israel in the Congress or any other place. It doesn't seem that is actually giving the results that we want. And this is again part of our frustration, is that we've done everything. We've used all of the possible mechanism and possible channels in order for us to kind of change this narrative, but it's just absolutely not changing. And not only that, but they're actually now expanding into the Arab world, and after that it's going to be into the Islamic world. And there's nothing that can force Israel at this point in time to actually to negotiate with the Palestinians and tell them, hey, okay, fine, we get back, we'll give you the 67. I think that we are in the darkest areas of our history as Palestinians. And I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of Arab pressure on us that either take what you're going to get or we're going to leave you behind. Seriously, the most important person in this whole issue is the guy that is living in a tent next to the settlement. Because this is the guy that I want, and his kids and his children, that I want to actually to support. Because if we do not support those people who are at the forefront of the whole thing, then by the time that there's going to be a change in the mentality or a change of hearts or whatever, that to come and negotiate, you are not going to find these people who are living at the only 5 meters away from the settlement. You're not going to find them so that you can negotiate on them. You already have the settlement has expanded already. You're already going to have the settlers that are actually taking over more and more land. So it is very, very, very important. This is the kind of the motto of our small organization, that we are trying to support those people. Because that guy in the tent, he does not know what BDS is. He does not know, he would not appreciate that the Secretary General of the United Nations actually came out with a statement that condemned the ongoing expansion of settlements. That is not going to make much difference for him. So for us, we are really trying to support that guy as much as possible in terms of having to provide kindergartens for them, to buy cars for them. Sometimes we even bought, we gave dowry for somebody so he can get married and stay in that area. Currently, right now, we are building a house next to a settlement so somebody can stay, steadfast in his land. So it is these kind of practical things, at least from our perspective, that are very much needed in order for us to support those people
Yes,
at the front line. You go back to Leah
there
eventually,
has been
what was
some
the
sort of
note?
a refreshing wind coming in from the States, especially when it came back to a large number of my Jewish friends that are, especially the younger generation, that are coming out of having to question. I wouldn't say defy, but to question the kind of the morals, quote unquote, of the occupation. Because my understanding is that the Jewish voices has been always very active in the social rights movement, even since the 60s until these days. Everything that has to do with rights in the States, you will find that the American Jews are part of it, if not actually a powerful force behind it. So why is it that when it comes down to the question of Palestine, that the machine stops there? So there has that actually prompted a lot of questions, especially by the younger generation who formed their own movements and actually coming in on each every year to come and work with us in the South Hebron Hills, in Bethlehem, to actually to stand up by the Palestinians, because that is part of what being Jewish to them is. The Jewish values that Rami was talking about have been always siding out with the oppressed, have been always siding out with the people who have been, rights have been violated. So that should, naturally, let's say, being applied to the Palestinians from the Jewish perspective. So I'm definitely very happy about that, and I'm with Naomi when it comes down to actually having to try to move to shake up the waters in the UK in that regard. I know maybe they tried it with Corbyn and having to actually to have some sort of a voice within the Labour Party, and that was being fought back, I would say, mercilessly during his reign of power and even during the elections. And I've been following up with this, but I think that is the right track. We have to raise that question.